Hello and welcome back to Election Time News America. Today is Thursday, November 20th, 2025, and today we're going to be going over the 2026 Senate map, the very difficult pathway to 51 Senate seats. Of course, with this caveat. Um, for the Republicans only for control of the Senate majority. Election Time News, your one stop for all things elections and politics, from summations to poll reviews and news. Subscribe below for more content that's about American, Canadian, and Australian elections. Also, follow Substack, Threads, Instagram, and X. Also, check out our website, electiontimene.ws, for the latest news feeds and predictions. Remember, there's never a dull moment in politics. So, here we have our beautiful map. And so we're going to be filling this out, of course, with our usual 12, 6, 2 plus, and less than 2 margins. And so let's not really stall on this that much. Let's just get right into it. We can just start with the safe seats. I mean, there's a few that really just aren't going to be competitive whatsoever. South Dakota, Wyoming, Idaho, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Alabama, South Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia. Those are going to go to the Republicans no matter what happens. I mean, you could have a blue super wave, and basically, those will go Republican. Um, I mean, if you had a super wave, then maybe South Carolina could drop below 12. But these are going to go by more than 12, essentially, like no matter what happens under any physical circumstance. So it's not. Louisiana's a bit complicated, but now that it's primary, it's gonna be a bit weird. But those are going to go by a lot no matter what. And then for the Democrats, they have less, but they do still have a few. And there's going to be Virginia, which is going to be over 12. And so, just based on the general national environment, these ones are absolutely going to be by over 12 on election night. I can almost guarantee, I'd be willing to pay money to say that these are going to end up being by over 12 no matter what. So, and then states that are going to go one way or the other. South Carolina, as of right now, that is still a bit over 12 points. As of right now, it is actually about 13.7%. That's just mainly just due to weak. I don't know why I don't have it open. Mostly just due to weak performance for, I believe that is Graham this cycle. Yes, against Harrison, but he was an extremely strong fundraiser. Not much worse, though, honestly, for the Democrats, though. But we'll have to see how that ends up going. That first, there's typically at least one poll done, and so based on that, we'll be able to gauge things and also look at how certain demographics vote and the demographics of the state. And then from there, we can kind of generally guess where the state may end up on election night. Because Harrison was a strong overperformer there with his fundraising supergiant machine. Montana is in there as well, 15 points. It's not going to be as close as it was. Bullock was the Democratic governor up until 2020, so he did very well against Daines, and even then he did lose by 10. So that's going to be over 12 for Daines. Not really much of a contest as far as that goes. And that's all of the safe states across the board, believe it or not. It's not necessarily, that does not mean that all these are going to be competitive. It doesn't mean that all of them are going to be contested. But there are 16 states that, as of right now, are projected to be under 12 percentage points. Next, we're going to go to the likely states, and quite a few Republican states fit into this column, including Kansas and Mississippi. These two are not necessarily competitive. They were under 12 points in 2020, so it's not even out of the ordinary necessarily. Marshall is an underperformer, and if there is a strong enough candidate, if Laura Kelly had joined this race, this could have been down to about 5, which would have been very interesting to watch. But Marshall's not necessarily a strong performer there. I don't necessarily think it's Barbara Bollier's strength, because she's just a physician and a state senator, right? So she didn't necessarily have any large name there. But it's just Roger Marshall wasn't a very strong margin. Interestingly enough, it was actually further than most projectors, expected to be about 6. Believe it or not, around 6 points there. This Democratic pollster actually had Bollier winning, so that's a bit weird as far as that goes. But Marshall is still kind of an underperformer as far as that goes. just based on the pure partisan lean, he should be winning by about 14. Instead, he's under 10. And then we go to Mississippi. Hyde Smith's another underperformer, winning by 9.98% against SB. SB is generally a very strong candidate, not running again this cycle, though, so that's a bit of a blow. But partisan lean should be 21.3%, down to about 10, under 10. So we'll have to see how the candidacy shakes up. As of right now, that's just against a somewhat strong candidate. You can see that it's definitely on the better side for the Democrats here. But as of right now, pretty strong showing. Also going to be likely is the state of Florida. This is a special election, but Ashley Moody, pretty strong, only 7.6%. So it's nothing insane, but definitely hanging on by a relatively high amount. And then Alaska, this is it's quite contingent on a few things. Sullivan's a pretty strong candidate. Depends who really ends up running here. If Mary Peltola does run, this is probably going to get down to about 4 points pretty quickly. But it's very, again, it's completely depends on how things end up shaking up on the overall ballot side. Oh, for safe states, I missed Colorado. That did get upgraded to just around 13 points. Hickenlooper is running. He said this is his last time in the Senate. Then we have our likely states, and in this column is going to be states like Minnesota, 7 points for whoever ends up running there. Probably not going to be Angie Craig. Smith only won by 5. This is actually going to be an improvement. Um, Flanagan is the leader right now, current lieutenant governor of Minnesota. And Republicans only have Royce White, who lost pretty handily to Amy Klobuchar in 2024. Now, believe it or not, 15.5 is actually a really low margin for Klobuchar. If you go look back at her previous elections, 24 in 2018. In 2012, she won by 35. And then when she first won the seat in 2006, she won it by 20. So that's the smallest margin she's had ever. And so, I mean, it was a Republican environment. Polarization has caught up to her. So that definitely hurt a bit, but still, that is something of note. But she still is a pretty good overperformer. Um, and Royce White is a general underperformer as well. So, you're going to end up having probably a pretty strong margin as far as that goes. New Mexico is another one that's going to be pretty likely here. 8.3%. Pretty strong margin for Lujan. Appears to be a relatively poor performer as far as things go, honestly. 2014 was Udall, though, so, now finally have the incumbency advantage. And they didn't have before this. Then we actually go to, believe it or not, nope, that's under 6. I believe that's actually all of them now that I check it over again. And so that is actually, yes, that is all of them. So 47, 44, 9 close states. These are states that are all going to be under 6%. And so these we're going to go a bit more in depth on. So these are the ones that we're probably going to be watching all cycle. Maine, New Hampshire, Ohio, Michigan, Iowa, Nebraska, Texas, Georgia, and North Carolina. The latter of the two showing a lot about the future of the Democratic Party. So to start off with the lean states, what we have here are going to be the slightly more competitive states. These are going to be from 2 to 6 points. And so the first one here is going to be the state of Georgia in the southeast. This is John Ossoff's seat. He narrowly won this by 1.2% against the incumbent Perdue. David Perdue, the incumbent, lost in a runoff. He actually almost won the first round, but did not reach the 50% required. So then he went to a runoff with Ossoff, in which Ossoff narrowly won. So far, Ossoff has been doing phenomenally, and his fundraising machine has been absolutely off the rails and been completely breaking records like usual for Ossoff, raising $50 million, and this is as of a few months ago. And Republicans are disoriented and don't really have any strong front runner. You have Mike Collins and Buddy Carter, who are going up against each other, both of them retiring from the House, and they're going to be competing against each other, which is only going to help Ossoff build up a messaging campaign, which is probably going to go very well. And now that we've seen what happened in 2025 with those commissioners, we've seen that Georgia's turnout dynamics are potentially changing in lower propensity elections, where in 2022 they benefited Republicans, right? Warnock really only did this well because of the extreme black turnout that he was able to provide. But in North Carolina, Bud won by 3.25 points. Right, for example, Britt won by 35, Scott won by 26. Those dynamics worked opposite as they do in the Rust Belt, where typically it ends up helping the Democrats. But now we might have something where it's just helping the Democrats everywhere. Now, it could just be because of the extremely low turnout that happened in 2025. But we're going to have to be continuing to watch on that on those polls. He's doing very well, 3.6%. There's absolutely some polls down here somewhere. Collins is ahead by 10, but that's very low. That's only 62%, so that's a lot of undecideds there. Kentucky Senate Democratic primary doesn't really matter that much. Brown actually ahead of Houston here. Hugo is probably going to be a pretty good pollster this time around, honestly, and I say that because it's going to be a Democratic strong year. Ossoff against Carter is up by 3. Against Dooley is up by 7. So 3 points or so. That sounds to be right about on par. So that is going to be the first lean state on our map here. Next is going to be Iowa by just under 6 percentage points. This one's going to be pretty variable. It could go up to about 2 points to the Democrats. Ernst is retiring. And so usually this would hurt, but it will actually help here as she's very unpopular. And so she also made some very non-productive comments for her candidacy. So she decided to retire. Now Ashley Hinson is running here, U.S. Representative for the 2nd Congressional District. Very strong candidate, and so she is definitely going to end up being in the lead here. But the Democrats do have some pretty strong candidates. Nathan Sage, who has some potential chance there. Josh Turek, who is the a Democratic representative in a district, the most Republican district that any Democrat represents in the legislature of Iowa. And Zach Walz, a state senator from a blue district. He's probably honestly the weakest candidate here. If I had to guess, Josh Turek is probably the strongest because he's able to communicate with these Republican voters in an area like Iowa. He represents a district out over here. I'm opening the presidential map so I can open up better. Oh, I clicked it too soon. Right about this area, Pottawatomie County and Shelby County, I believe, is most of where it is. It's somewhere near that special Senate election, but it's right across from Omaha, right over here. So, like, right there. Yeah, Pottawatomie County, right about there, has that little bit of Sioux City, I believe, in there, that is. So he's able to communicate with those Republican voters. I think, honestly, he's probably the best case they have, but it's too early to say in the primary right now. A competitive primary is only going to help Hinson, etc. So that's probably going to end up going Republican as of now. We do have also in this column is the state of Texas under 3 points. This is insane. And this is because there's a competitive Democratic primary, but they have James Tallarico, who may end up being a very strong candidate. He's a fundraising supergiant, that's for sure. He broke the record of all-time fundraising in the first, I think it was 30 days or so. And so that's definitely going to help him in every single situation there if he's able to end up doing that well with fundraising. That just shows that he's probably going to be a pretty competitive candidate, potentially like Ossoff as well, right? And so I'm trying to find the information here on. Yep, there it is. I found the announcement that he was running. But he broke the quarterly fundraising record in Texas in 3 weeks. So that was the record he broke. He broke the quarterly fundraising record in just 3 weeks. He outraised Colin Allred, who ran for this seat in 2024 and did pretty well. Considering the Republican environment, at least, lost to Cruz by only 8.5 points. Now, of course, O'Rourke, who was originally supposed to be the Democratic poster child in Texas, lost to Cruz by 2.5 in 2018, and that appears to potentially be the Democrats' ceiling in Texas, or maybe the absolute ceiling would be around 2. So who knows how much better someone could do against Cornyn. But the thing is that it's not all necessarily against Cornyn. You have two challengers to Cornyn. Ken Paxton, the Texas Attorney General, very scandal-plagued, relatively unpopular, as well as Wesley Hunt, a relatively not well-known candidate. So all of that put together means that you end up with a competitive primary that's just going to end up hurting Cornyn and or Paxton. And if Paxton ends up winning, that's just going to end up hurting with independents who are already hurting. As you're seeing, Texas is a huge disapproval rating. Keep in mind, this state voted for Trump by 14, and now they're looking at minus 18. And amongst the voters that voted for him by 14, he has a net approval rating of minus 1.5 points. That means that about 15.5% of those people changed their mind. And not necessarily, right? 15.5 percentage point difference. That's actually what it is. But it's the only state that, other than North Carolina and all the states that went for Biden, the 2020 Biden states, and North Carolina and Texas are the only ones which their 2024 electorate disapproves of Trump. One of them being Texas. North Carolina went for Trump by about 3, Texas by 14. That is an insane swing, and mostly amongst Hispanic voters. If we look up here at the down here, actually, demographics, Hispanic voters are anywhere from minus 22 to about minus 30, 32, somewhere in there. So that is going to hurt a lot for the Republicans. And if they're potentially getting a more conservative aligned candidate, that may end up harming things. You may end up getting the best of both worlds of 2020 style Hispanic voting and white voting, like even better than 2018. And so we could see this race get very, very competitive. We'll just have to see, though, because, of course, a lot could happen until then. Then we go to Michigan, 3.6% for the Democrats. This is going to be a hold, and this was Gary Peters' seat. And the Republicans scored gold again as they are getting Mike Rogers in this seat. He ran against Alyssa Slotkin in 2024 and lost by only 19,000 votes out of over 5.3 million cast. And so, very strong candidate there. She was just a little bit stronger. And so now you have these candidates here. It's not necessarily a very strong bench. I think the best one would probably be Mallory McMorrow. Seems to be relatively moderate, somewhat well likable, but interestingly enough, here Stevens actually polled a bit better than McMorrow did, but both of them were in fact beating Rogers as of right now based on these polls. Now, of course, again, you're going to have to look at the trend line, not the top line, but as of right now, it's not looking too poor for the Democrats in the state of Michigan. And we go to New Hampshire, narrowly under 6 right now. That's because of the entrance of Chris Sununu. And so that's going to make things a little bit more complicated for the Democrats here. Sununu is the brother of, John Sununu, former U.S. Senator for this seat, lost to Shaheen in 2008. Brother of Chris Sununu, former governor of New Hampshire. But the Democrats have Chris Pappas, who is a pretty strong U.S. House candidate, already has a lot of support behind him, so that's not going to be a very competitive primary. Shaheen was an amazing candidate, and honestly would have been very much better for the Democrats to have her run again, but that didn't happen. But it doesn't look like it's going to be that big of a deal here. They're probably going to be able to carry to the finish line in New Hampshire. And then finally in Nebraska, ever so narrowly, 2.1% for Not Sassy Ricketts, 25 points in 2024, but running against the independent Dan Osborne, who is running again in 2026, only lost by 6.75 points in 2024. And this is because he is an independent. He explicitly said he would not caucus with either party, and he is going out on a more populist approach. And so Pete Ricketts is a much more popular senator than Fisher was. However, Osborne now has experience, and so he also has a bit stronger fundraising as well. This is going to be a much more interesting race here. Both of these were commissioned by Osborne, but the fact that they show him actually competing with Ricketts does actually say a good bit. So that is going to be a very interesting race to watch to see how close it will end up being. But as of right now, that's going to be very narrowly for the Republicans, which means that they will hold on to control of the United States Senate. So that's why this is going to be a very difficult challenge for the Democrats is the math isn't showing up. Now, if they hadn't lost Pennsylvania, which again is a huge loss, it was 15,115 votes in Pennsylvania out of that's 6.7 million cast, then they would be in a much better picture. And they could actually, it's not improbable that they could pick up all of these, which means that they could have, without way too much difficulty, picked up the Senate had they not lost Casey's seat. So that's a huge blow to the Democrats, but they are going to not be able to flip the Senate this cycle. But that does set them up strong for 2028. If we then go to the tilt states, these are ones that are going to be fought tooth and nail by both parties, and these are going to be critical. All three of these states have negative approval ratings of Trump. Two of the three have negative approvals amongst their 2024 electorates in very varying amounts. Ohio, plus 1.1, North Carolina, minus 5, and Maine, minus 19.5. And to go in order of how strongly they're going for one candidate or the other, we're going to start off in Maine, where the Democrats are favored by 1.9%. This is this is the flip, and this is a flip for the Democrats. Susan Collins won by 8.5 on the same ballot that Joe Biden won the state by 9, 17 points of split ticket voting, which generally doesn't happen anymore. And also, her approval rating's in the garbage, and so is Trump's. So in both of those, that's really not going to end up going that well. Interestingly, here in this poll, Collins is beating Mills, but I believe this is a poll conducted by Plattner, and the fact that they're tied means that this is going to be a very competitive primary, and this is a full field one, and it's not looking that good. So this primary is going to be very disastrous for the Democrats. It's turning out what, oh, they actually have a campaign section now, and it actually ended up turning out into what they really didn't want it to end up being, which is very competitive, and that will only end up helping Collins. She hasn't officially announced yet, interestingly enough, but she's probably assumed that she will. And so now what you have left is the problem that this competitive primary may end up just helping Collins. And they also have a bench problem now. Now Graham Plattner has quite a few scandals, believe it or not, to his name at this point, which really isn't going to help his electability argument. But neither does Mills. She's not popular. She only has a +5 approval rating, which is 1, 2, 3. Fourth least popular in the country. Fourth least popular in the country, only ahead of Braun, McKee, and Reynolds. So the issue with that is just in and of itself that, you're looking at who this is completely going to end up being a lesser of two evils. But now when you're looking at increased strongly decreased split ticket voting across the entire country, the Democrats may narrowly end up coming out with the edge, but we will be watching this race. I think this one's actually going to be potentially the most competitive, if not the next state on the list, which is the state of Ohio, which will go Republican, but it is still narrowing up. It is getting more narrow, and we could see Brown pulling up to about a 4-point win, which is actually not quite as much as he won in 2018, but still, that's more than Sinema won by in Arizona, more than Manchin won by in West Virginia, which doesn't necessarily that surprising. But Brown winning by 6.8%, right? He could end up winning by 4. He lost narrowly by 3.6%. We could see him winning by more than he lost by, which would be kind of, a strong comeback story there. But he'd probably only make it one cycle. I don't know he'd be able to make re-election in 2030 unless it's a strong Democratic year, which would mean that most likely J.D. Vance would have to win in 2028. But anyways, what we're seeing here is a continually tightening race. This is the replacement for J.D. Vance's seat. Speaking of J.D. Vance, John Husted is the incumbent unelected senator here, and he's not necessarily doing very poorly. He's pretty strong. Partisan environment expected to result in 9.9%. But then you have the fact that Sherrod Brown is an incumbent senator who has done very well in this seat before. He first won in this seat in 2006 against current governor Mike DeWine by 12%. 12%, which is huge. I mean, just look at some of these other numbers in 2006, though. I mean, 2006 was insane. And I mean, currently, based on how this environment's going, we might be looking at somewhat of a 2006 environment. But even then, you had a Republican win by 53 in Maine. And then he won in 2012 by 6. In 20 and Josh Mandel, I just thought that. Never mind. 2018 he won by 7, and he lost in 2024 by 3.5%. Will he be able to make a comeback? As of right now, it looks like a narrow no, but again, depends on how close this hovers. We're looking at 1.1%, which means that most likely, as of right now, the electorate of 2026 in Ohio will have a negative approval rating of Trump. As of right now, if the expected midterm turnout went out to the polls right now in Ohio, they would disapprove of Trump just because of turnout dynamics. Because if this is the 2024 voters, it's going to be more Democratic leaning than the general 2024 electorate. That's just how it works in America in this day and age. So how they can narrowly tie it to that, but also make it a bit more local is going to be the main story. But again, we're going to have to watch. This race is going to be pretty contested with Maine on the most competitive. And then finally, North Carolina, 1.5% for Roy Cooper. This has actually gone up a little bit. This due to general ballot ratings and such changing up a bit. But here, Michael Whatley, the former chair of the RNC, he is working on increasing his name recognition. That's the number one thing that he's doing currently in the state of North Carolina. But Roy Cooper has that in the bag. He is the former governor. He just left office this past January. And he was a very popular governor. And so he is just trying to charge his way through to this seat. It is currently an open seat. He is trying to be able to pull together the entire state that voted for Trump 3 times, which is going to be pretty difficult, but didn't vote by that much. When you look at these areas that are actually still growing, right, you have these, not what I meant to do. When you look at these areas here that are growing, right, you have these areas here, right, the Research Triangle, the area around Winston-Salem, Greenboro. Kamala Harris won by 20. So, that's going to be college transplants. That's going to be increased suburbanite shifts. If you look at the shift line from 2020 to 2024, Harris did worse in the state of North Carolina. But if you look at these suburbs around Charlotte, 1.3 to the left. Okay, so that's going to be the main concern here. If you look at some of this out here as well, the general Research Triangle area, okay, R plus 0.3, but that includes some stuff out here in the deep cities, right? But you look at the Raleigh suburbs, which is going to be this minus that. D plus 0.0, okay? So that's basically even, and that's if you get rid of this, right? Oops. Get rid of that, right? And get rid of the inner cities, because those kind of move to the right, right? Get rid of the outer regions. Now you end up with D plus 0.3, okay? So when you're looking at the suburbs, they shifted to the left. You're looking at that around Charlotte. You're looking at that around High Point. That's going to be the university. That's the youth vote. That's coming back around too, as we saw in oh my, that's got to be a college campus too. Saw that in 2024 as well. And so this is downtown Greensboro. So D plus 0.5 of the entire state shifted by about 2.5 to the right. So that's 3-point shift. That's a 3-point trend to the left. So that's what we're looking at here when we're looking at, and most of it's white. Over half of this area is white. And some of these suburban regions voted very heavily for Trump. They shifted to the left. They're exurbs, right? So that's the story here, right? Harris narrowly won the votes in these regions, mostly because of the Durham area, right? That makes sense. But that is going to be the number one issue for the Republicans in North Carolina is continued trends. Are we going to be able to, are the Democrats, are we going to be able to see an environment that is blue enough and a state that is turnout friendly enough that gets to a point, it's not going to be 8.5, right? We're not going to have a Kay Hagan blue enough, right? You're not going to see these counties go blue, for example. That's not happening. You're not going to see these counties go blue, other than Buncombe. That's not happening. But that's not, that's going to be what they're going to want to see, right? And so that's going to, they're going to be focusing on North Carolina. They're going to be putting a lot of money in North Carolina. They already have, and it's expected to be the most expensive Senate race in American history. And so it's going to probably come down to North Carolina and Ohio. But even if Democrats flip Ohio, then it's still going to be 50-50. But that does mean that Republicans are going to get every single vote they can get, which means that people that candidates like Lisa Murkowski, um, and I think she's the only like somewhat independent Republican that's left at this point, but she's basically going to own the floor at that point. So that's going to completely change the dynamics for the second half of Trump's term, even if this does come to fruition. Or maybe she's just going to start falling in line more, which is probably the more likely option. But altogether, 51-49. Things are getting a bit better for the Democrats now that we're continuing to see these trends across the country. Things are not going well for the Republicans as of right now, but there is still basically an entire year left. And if you ever know anything in politics, is never count the current losers out, because things change and things can change very quickly. Thank you guys so much for watching today's video. Make sure to like down below, subscribe to the channel. Let me know if your thoughts in the comments. I love hearing from you guys. And thank you again, and have a fantastic rest of your day.